From the headquarters of Telesur English in Caracas, Venezuela, this is From the South, and I am Leila Segabi. We begin with the news. The Foreign Minister of Paraguay, Luis Castiglione, has resigned over an energy agreement signed with Brazil. Social movements protested in Asunción over the weekend against the agreement. They say it would give much more control to Brazil over the giant Itaipú hydroelectric plant, which the two countries share. Last week, the head of Paraguay's state electricity company, and they also resigned in opposition to the deal. He said it would cost the country an extra $300 million. And our correspondent in Paraguay, Osvaldo Sayas, has the details.
I'm here in the Paraguayan Senate. This is where we were expecting the Foreign Minister, Luis Castiglione, to appear, along with Luis Alderete, the president of the Itaipú plant, Alcides Jimenez, the president of the state electricity company Andes, and Hugo Caballero, the Paraguayan ambassador to Brazil. However, the session has been cancelled after President Mario Abdo accepted the resignation of all four men. All this is because of the agreement the Paraguayan government signed with the Brazilian government of Jair Bolsonaro. According to the opposition, this agreement surrendered Paraguay's sovereignty over the Itaipú hydroelectric plant, which Paraguay shares with Brazil. This agreement only became public 2 months after it was signed and provoked demonstrations by social movements, as well as threats of a motion of censure in Congress against the president. The opposition Liberal group in the lower house said that if the president didn't sack the foreign minister and these other officials today, they would table the motion of censure. The Senate is now going to debate a motion that would leave the agreement between the Paraguayan and Brazilian governments without effect.
Thank you, Osvaldo, for your report. And at least 52 prisoners have died after a riot broke out at the Altamira prison in north of Brazil. Reportedly, a fight between criminal groups started when breakfast was being served. According to state prison authorities, at least 16 victims were beheaded while others were asphyxiated. The inmates later set fire around the prison, preventing authorities from entering for about 5 hours. No prison staff were injured, although 2 were held hostage, but later were released. And Brazil's presidential spokesperson, Otávio Rego Barros, has said the prisoners who have been identified as ringleaders of the riot will be transferred from the Altamira facility to other federal penitentiaries.
The Ministry of Justice and Public Safety has made available space in the federal penitentiary system for the transfer and isolation of the criminal leaders involved in the rebellion that took place on Monday morning at the Altamira Regional Recovery Center and left more than 50 dead.
We have more news of Brazil. The National Indigenous Foundation has denounced the murder of a Wayapi indigenous leader who was attacked by a group of armed miners in the state of Amapá, north of the country. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemos, gives us more details.
We are in the indigenous Wayampi lands in the state of Amampa, northeast of Brazil, where an indigenous leader, Emira Wayampi, was murdered by a group of illegal armed miners, according to a statement given to the National Indigenous Foundation by the indigenous community. The attackers, who were armed with machine guns, invaded the indigenous land located close to the Renca Reserve, a natural and environmental protection area here in Brazil. Wayampi people had already reported and condemned the entry of these illegal miners at the time Jair Bolsonaro was declaring his son, Eduardo Bolsonaro, as the new U.S. ambassador to ensure that mining agreements on indigenous land are accomplished. Bolsonaro says indigenous areas are strategic for Brazil's economic growth. However, his plan involves taking away the rights of indigenous communities living in those territories. Opposition parties and movements have already expressed and rejected Bolsonaro's statement and plans. They said his plan will lead to a genocide of indigenous people. The UN has also expressed concern at the murder of the Guayampi leader.
From Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemos, thank you for your report. In other news, in Puerto Rico, over the replacement of the Gobernador Ricardo Rosselló, who will leave office on the 22nd of August, the last alternative in the constitutional succession was the Secretary of Justice Wanda Vazquez, who on Sunday declined to be Rosselló's successor. The first alternative, according to the constitutional, would have been former Secretary of State Luis Rivera Marin. He, however, resigned earlier last month due to his involvement to the leaked chat scandal, which caused the protests that led to Rosselló's resignation. At the moment, there are 3 people in the line to succeed Pedro Pierluisi, former representative of Puerto Rico in the U.S. Congress, Thomas Rivera Satz, president of the Senate, and Jennifer Gonzalez, current delegate of Puerto Rico in the U.S. Congress.
If we are going to describe in a word the situation is uncertain. The governor is in the process of leaving office. He has named a Secretary of State yet, or a person for an orderly and satisfactory succession. To this uncertainty, we must add the fact that the Secretary of Justice, who is next in order of succession, simply doesn't want to be governor. This increases the ongoing uncertainty. Therefore, we don't know what is going to happen. Obviously, Puerto Rico has not collapsed, but certainly we need a government we need above all to reestablish relations with the entire population.
Intachable. Impeccable. It is not possible to challenge it. We need flawless leadership, which means that nobody could question if they can be charged legally or not. We have to see if they can be found. If they cannot find them, that means both part and the party are corrupted at times. Those are very big, those are very important questions to solve, and really they go into the heart of what happened in Puerto Rico. Incredible.
Environmental movements in El Salvador are asking the National Assembly to pass legislation to limit the damage caused by the use of plastics. They want controls on the production of sale of plastic products, especially single-use ones.
The pollution of rivers and the sea by huge quantities of plastic has become a worldwide concern. In El Salvador, environmentalists are demanding regulation of these products, which are damaging to health.
It's a very long-lasting material. It can take 500 years for plastic to decompose. However, it was only invented a century and a half ago, which means that all of the plastic items that we have ever created are still there, some in waste tips, some in the ocean.
Global plastic production is estimated to be 400 million tons per year. The low level of recycling means that many of these items end up in the sea.
It ends up being food for the fish, and then we eat the fish. Every week, each human being consumes enough plastic to make a credit card. In 2014, there was 1 pound of plastic in the ocean for every 5 pounds of fish. By mid-century, we are going to have more plastic than fish in the sea.
That's why environmentalists came to the Legislative Assembly to increase awareness among lawmakers about the damage caused by plastic, and to urge them to legislate to limit its production and sale, especially for products that are only used once.
The law that we have presented is short. It has 22 articles. It attributes direct responsibilities to companies and, of course, to all citizens. Since we all have a responsibility not just to throw plastic in the garbage, but to recycle it, the non-generation of waste is the main commitment.
The toxic components used to manufacture plastics have serious consequences for human health. These range from stunt growth and weight loss among children under 12 to negative impacts on the immune and reproductive systems.
Remember, you can follow us on Twitter as @Telesur English and @Laila Segavi Telesur. We'll be back with more news. We're back with more news. At least 7 protesters, including 4 students, have been killed in central Sudan. Several others were wounded, including a number of school children. They were reportedly shot at by security forces during a student rally in Al Ubaid. These demonstrations were a continuation of recent protests in rejection of a recent report into the June 3rd massacre, in which dozens were killed outside Khartoum's military headquarters. The report alleges that some rogue security forces and the RSF paramilitary were responsible for the massacre. Meanwhile, talks between protesters and the ruling military council on installing a transitional civilian administration are to resume on Tuesday. And the bail hearing for a detained pro-Iranian Shiite cleric in Nigeria has been postponed for the second time in 2 weeks. Sheikh Ibrahim Zakzaki has been detained since 2015 following clashes between his followers and the army and has been charged with culpable homicide, murder, unlawful assembly, and disruption of peace.
The health situation is very bad. Cannot come. We applied the last time. The last time, they were actually in the vehicle that brought them. They couldn't climb the stairs to attend the court proceeding. And so we applied on that day for them to be excused from the proceedings. And the court granted the application. The DPP also saw them. So he didn't oppose the application.
And moving on to Libya, 5 health workers have been killed and 8 more injured in an attack on a hospital. Services at the hospital have been suspended due to the damage sustained. The attack is the latest in a series of violations targeting health facilities. In 2019, according to the World Health Organization, almost 40 health facilities have been attacked.
We were saved, and here we are today to bury 46 of our brothers, children and women. We survived. We are Eritreans.
And as the migrant crisis in the Mediterranean worsens, Pope Francis has called for swift action to stop more migrant deaths.
Dear brothers and sisters, with pain I learned the news about the dramatic shipwreck that happened in recent days in the waters of the Mediterranean Sea, where dozens of migrants, including women and children, lost their lives. I renew a heartfelt appeal for the international community to act promptly and decisively to avoid the repetition of similar tragedies and to guarantee the safety and dignity of all. I invite you to pray with me for the victims and for their families, as well as to ask from our hearts, Father, why?
Meanwhile, the United Nations envoy to Libya has called for a truce to be declared in the country by August 10th. Ghassan Salami said such a truce must mark the Eid al-Adha holiday and be accompanied by confidence-building moves such as exchange of prisoners and the release of those arbitrarily detained. Since April, Libya has been gripped by deadly violence as forces led by General Khalifa Haftar have tried to take Tripoli from the government of national accord.
Following the truce, I request a high-level meeting of concerned countries to cement the cessation of hostilities, work together to enforce the strict implementation of the arms embargo to prevent the further flow of weapons to the Libyan theater, and promote strict adherence to international humanitarian and human rights law by Libyan parties.
We have more news. At least 13 civilians, including 2 children, have been killed in northern Yemen following an artillery strike by Saudi forces. The attack on the Al Thabit market in the Al Shabi district of Saada also left 26 wounded, 12 of whom are children. Since 2015, fighting between a US-backed Saudi-led coalition and Houthi rebels has led to a humanitarian crisis in Yemen, as tens of thousands have died and millions suffer from starvation. Ethiopia has broken the world record by planting more than 200 million trees in a day. The country's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is leading the project, which is meant to counter the effects of deforestation and climate change in the country. The tree planting exercise is part of his Green Legacy initiative, which is being implemented at 1,000 sites across the country. According to the United Nations, Ethiopia's forest coverage has declined from 35% to 4% of the country in the last 2 decades. Strikes end in Chile after 7 weeks called by the teachers' union. Mario Aguilar, its president, spoke on the achievements.
The decision was taken to lift the strike, but that doesn't mean that we're going to give up the fight. Not at all. This doesn't mean that we're going to give up on the pending issues. It's logical that a movement has a moment in which it has to stop. Never-ending strikes don't exist, and having seen evidence of being worn down, you can understand that there are colleagues that agree with the decision, understanding that there are those who also voted to keep fighting. Those who did so believing that there are the conditions to do so were within their rights, and if that option had won, that of course we'd have respected it, as we did in the previous consultation with the members. Here you have to respect what the members say, and I'm going to defend that fundamental principle. For us, it's not a procedure. Instead, it's a principle. We believe in direct and participatory democracy. Beyond this decision, the movement made extraordinary achievements, and our colleagues should value the citizens' support that we've had during this enormous movement. We've received the kindness of the people, and that's something we had lost. We have to recognize the importance of that, and this movement had support nearing 70%.
Also in Chile, more than 40,000 liters of diesel have been spilled at a terminal belonging to the Cap Mining Company on Guarillo Island. The spill happened 250 kilometers northeast of Puerto Natales. The Navy said that they have managed to recover close to 15,000 liters of contaminated water. 2 specialist ships were sent to the site to control and mitigate the damage. Authorities have started an investigation into the cause of the spill. The director of Greenpeace Chile asked for transparency from the Navy and the mining company.
There are mammal habitats near to the site of the incident and a unique ocean biodiversity. There are dolphins and other places used by whales as a sanctuary on our planet. The waters of Patagonia are a genuine sanctuary because they are some of the most pristine waters that we still have on Earth.
There is a maritime investigation on the board in order to begin the opening stages of an investigation into the causes, circumstances, and responsibilities that there will be regarding the spill of diesel into the sea.
Moving on to other news, Bolivia's Minister of Hydrocarbons has condemned the plans of opposition presidential candidates who seek to privatize the sector. According to Minister Luis Alberto Sanchez, the plans of right-wing candidates Carlos Mesa, Victor Hugo Cárdenas, and Oscar Ortiz for the hydrocarbon sector will lead to a significant increase in fuel prices, as these candidates have proposed the privatization of the state-owned oil company YPBF. The government of Evo Morales was responsible for nationalizing the company, which today has assets worth $20 billion in addition to owning the country's oil and natural gas reserves. And quinoa farmers in Bolivia are worried about their seeds being stolen and genetically modified abroad. The grain is one of the richest food on the planet.
2 years ago, scientists funded by Saudi Arabia deciphered the quinoa genome, which would allow them to create genetically modified or transgenic seeds. This is a situation that worries Bolivian producers.
They took the saponin out of the seed. They also took the husk and they gave it a new name. We have many native types, like the Huilamin, Toledo, and Pasancaya. They patented this new type they created, but it actually comes from our region because they took the seeds from here.
According to quinoa producers, one of the quinoa strains that has been modified is that called bitter quinoa, which originally has 3 protective shells.
It was the easiest thing to find a way to make quinoa with less saponin or less husk. Actually, it's like peeling the skin off a human being. It's terrible. But what they don't realize is that they were creating a weak strain of quinoa that would be prone to diseases. That will force them to use lots of pesticides and that will contaminate the grains.
The Bolivian government is also concerned about native seeds being genetically modified, and especially about them being patented as the private property of corporations.
We know that genetic material has been taken to another country, and it has been registered as if it was their property. That's not legal.
The patent gives property rights to whoever registered it.
No se puede permitir de que siendo nuestro producto que se ha generado acá.
When anyone patents a resource like this, there are a lot of requirements to authorize its use. It's not permissible that we would have to ask for permission to use a seed that was originally ours.
Quinoa is considered one of the most nutritious foods on the planet. It contains calcium, iron, magnesium, vitamin C, E, B1, B2, and niacin, and is rich in amino acids, phosphorus, and omega-6, which helps the development of the brain.
For more stories, you can visit our website, www.telsurenglish.net. Let's take a short break. We'll be back with more news. We're back with more news. A new wave of floods has hit the region of Toulon in Russia's Irkutsk region. Heavy rains in the area have forced the Laya River, which runs through the town, to break its banks and flood the surrounding areas. The regional government has started evacuating people living in the worst affected areas. Floods have killed at least 25 people in and around Toulon since the rain season started in June. And at least 1,000 people, most of them children, have been diagnosed with dengue in Bangladesh over the last 24 hours. 8 people have died and there have been over 13,000 cases of the disease so far this year. According to the health ministry, this is the country's worst ever dengue outbreak, with hospitals overflowing, social media and flooded with pleas for blood donors. Dengue, which causes flu-like symptoms, can be deadly if it develops into an hemorrhagic fever. And efforts to save the 2015 Iran nuclear deal have been boosted by constructive talks between the remaining signatories in Austria. Envoys from Iran, China, Russia, Germany, France, and Britain met in Vienna as they seek to keep the joint comprehensive plan of action in place.
As I said, had complaints about each other. We raised this today. I think the atmosphere was constructive and the discussions were good. I cannot say that we resolved everything, but I can say that there are lots of commitments to the JCPOA and its survival. All remaining participants to the JCPOA are still committed and determined to save this deal, which is a big achievement of diplomacy in the recent years, and we will continue our efforts in that direction.
And at least 4 people have been killed in a shooting at a food festival in the United States and California. A 6-year-old boy is among the dead as another 15 were left injured. Police killed one suspect identified as 19-year-old Santino William Legan, but all still working under the belief he did not act alone.
We found out, some of the federal agencies helping us out. We found out that the rifle that this suspect used was an SKS. It was a AK-47 type assault rifle. It was purchased legally in the state of Nevada on July the 9th of this year. And I will confirm that the suspect is the person that several news media have been inquiring about, Santino William Logan, who is 19 years old. And I say that name with some hesitation because I don't believe that somebody like this deserves the notoriety or the recognition.
And like this, we'd come to the end of this news brief from FtS English. I'm Laila Sigabi. Thank you for watching. Until next time.